just do the same thing. It was good.
I'm Loretta.
Okay. I'm just going to say hello to everyone. I messed it up. I spoke while she was already pushed the recording button. So whatever you may have heard or not heard, just forget about it. We're going to start again. Okay, so take 2. Antoinette, you're on.
Take 2. We've got a bit of a Wi-Fi issue today because the wind is howling. So we decided to redo the first take. And Loretta didn't realize I was recording. Anyway, hello, everybody. And hello, Loretta. I'm excited to be back here with you. We haven't done an episode together for 2 weeks. It feels like 2 years. Today, we are going to deep dive into the topic of limiting beliefs, how they're formed, how they can run our show, and how they can make us sick. So as a backdrop, this is a very important topic, by the way, for your life and for your health. So if you find any value in this, please share. We've had great feedback about our podcast so far. Now I'm going off on a tangent, but I'm not deleting. Okay, so let's start this episode by just doing a short review of episode 4. And in episode 4, we covered unconscious beliefs, how they formed and how they run our lives until we change that. If you haven't listened to episode 4, please do. It forms a very important backdrop to today's episode and to everything we're going to put out, actually. And I'm going to just do a quick recap of episode 4. So forgive me if you've heard it before, but it's worth hearing again. And for those that haven't heard it, it's a very important start to looking at limiting beliefs. So we talked about Freud's model. He called it the iceberg model. And in this iceberg model, he said that 10% of what runs us as human beings is our conscious mind. And this is the part that we're aware of. It's the thoughts we know we're having, and it's what we think is the total sum of who we are. Meanwhile, the part submerged under the water, the iceberg underneath, is 90% of what runs our show, and that he called the unconscious, or some people call it the subconscious. You might hear it heard. And the unconscious, we explained, is in place by the age of 7. So everything that happens to you from the time you conceived until you're 7 years old, your socialization, your conditioning, in particular your upbringing, and definitely trauma, will inform the content of that unconscious program. So the thing is, we said, is that we don't actually know what's in there. It's unconscious. We think the 10% that we do know is all of it and all of us, and it most definitely is not. And in that unconscious lies our limiting belief systems. Okay, so our conditioned mind, we call it the unconscious, the 90%, the conditioned self. It's the part that is not who we authentically are. We are born, each and every one of us, with full awareness of who we are as part of the quantum divine soup. And in that space, all miracles are possible every day. But we become conditioned and socialized, and that spark, that full awareness we're born with, gets covered over with things that we're taught by our parents or by traumas that we experience. And so we start putting in place coping mechanisms, strategies, and belief systems as children to stay safe and loved in that environment. So by 7 years old, we explained we are who we are for the rest of our lives, unless we change that. So I know this is repetition, but it's really worth knowing this. And it's in this unconscious part of us, the unknown, that our limiting beliefs lie, and they are based on that childhood past or that in utero past. And many of them we can actually never change, but we can learn to deal with them very differently. What we need to know next, before we segue into some limiting beliefs and how they make us sick, is that these unconscious beliefs, most of them which are limiting, become self-fulfilling prophecies for us. We don't know they're there. We don't know they're running our lives, but they actually create more of what's there. So whatever our belief system is, our reticulating activating system, that's a fancy word for a part of the brain that looks for familiarity. It's a brain thing, this. So in my case, for example, my core unconscious belief, because I've done lots of work now on my unconscious, is that I'm just a piece of shit and I shouldn't be alive. I know that sounds drastic, but I've worked with it a lot and I can manage it most of the time and live a very successful life because I know it exists. But sometimes it still comes back and runs my show like it did the last few days. And I'll share a bit of that later. And that's because my brain is seeking, even though I'm aware of it and I'm working on changing the patterning, my brain is seeking more of what I believe. It's creating, so familiarity makes me feel safe, and that familiarity is not actually the safe space, because that's the space in which me and many human beings feel we can't trust ourselves, we can't trust life, we can't trust other people. So we start having all kinds of weird coping mechanisms and ways of dealing with things, and we've all got different things, although a lot of similar ones run through all human beings. But one of mine is, I'm just not safe because of what happened to me in utero. That's my deep unconscious belief. I'm not worthy and I can't trust anything, especially myself. And so when I'm not very aware, very grounded, very centered, and very much practicing all the tools we're going to offer you, I can slip back into that and it starts running my show until 2 days later I go, oh my goodness, look what's just happened to me the last 2 days, because that belief system will just keep on creating more and repeat the belief. Okay, so it's very important that we know that, because our lives become a self-fulfilling prophecy, mostly of what we don't want. We get what we believe and we don't know what we believe, because most of our beliefs are hidden from us, and most of these beliefs, unfortunately, are limiting beliefs. So before you want to disappear, because this is getting too hectic, I'm just going to tell you it's going to get juicy, because Loretta and I are going to share some of our own stuff, our own limiting beliefs, and how they've actually physically made us sick. So hang in there. We have never professed to be people who help other people from a place of being perfect gurus. We're not perfect gurus, or we are people who, in Loretta's case, is highly trained and experienced, but we're both people who have applied everything we teach on ourselves to transform our own lives, and that's why we have value, for no other reason. So with that long 8.5-minute ramble, I'm going to hand over to Loretta to talk about what some of these limiting beliefs are and how they make us sick. She's really an expert at this.
Thank you. That wasn't a ramble, by the way. I've heard this a million times and I was riveted. So I just want to start off by saying that I don't have any of these issues. I don't know what Antoinette's talking about. It's not true. Only Antoinette has these issues. I don't have any of these issues. No. I've definitely got these issues. So yeah, I'm a bit worried about the juicy part. But anyway, we'll worry about that when we get there. I just want to speak to a couple of things that Antoinette said. And she said that, some of these beliefs we can't change. So I think that beliefs can be sort of almost hierarchical, if you want to put it that way. I think we have some very foundational ones. Those are the ones that we develop in response to trauma or unmet needs. And those are the ones that actually don't change. And the reason why they can't change is because they inform our ego, like who we actually think we are. So if you think about your ego, so as Antoinette says, we're all born like, connected to the sort of divine soup, and we're all born with the same, we have different talents maybe, but we all have the same capacity to connect to the truth of who we really are, which is beyond our bodies, our minds, and our personalities, right? But what happens is we come into this world completely uninformed, and it's like we need a map. So when your ego develops, you've drawn a map. You've drawn a map of how the world works and how you get to be safe in the world. But the map isn't who you are. So if you look at a map of the Drakensberg, which is mountains in South Africa, right? You can see that it's mountains, and you can by scale, you can work out how long the range is and how high they are. It's not the same as hiking in the Drakensberg, having your feet on a path in one of those mountains. So who you really are is like you are the mountains, right? And the hiking trail. And who you think you are as a consequence of this map of reality that you formed, that's your limiting belief. That's your ego. Sorry, that's your ego. That's the conditioned self that she was saying, right? And so there are some beliefs that I do think that we can change. But these ones that we're talking about, these are these fundamental, almost building blocks of who we think we are. This part of ourselves, these part of ourselves that are conditioned. And one other little thing I just want to mention. So, Antoinette mentioned that for the last 2 days, she was stuck in some of her limiting belief patterns. When you know this and you have an awareness of this and you know what your limiting belief is and you recognize your coping strategy and you've got all these amazing tools, you are going to be fooled by your limiting beliefs because your ego is sneaky, very, very sneaky. So I want you to think of this as, if you're a healthy person who takes care of their health, if you've got good health and high vitality, I consider myself to be someone of good health. I've got good health. I don't have any chronic diseases. I don't take any medication. I have high vitality, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't mean I don't get sick. I do get sick. I get backache and I get infections. And I've had things like gallstones and kidney stones and injuries and blah, 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 right? This is not about once you get this, you're never going to like have a negative experience of these things in your life again. But the difference is when you're healthy, when you have a baseline of good health, your bounce back from ill health is actually quite good. And if you understand what these unconscious mechanisms are that drive your disease, you actually get the message of the disease or the signs or symptoms much quicker, which means you recover quicker. So it doesn't mean you don't get this. It's like, you see, like I get sick. I remember it used to irritate me when I was in practice, and then I'd have a streaming head cold or something, and I usually wouldn't work if I was ill. But I remember once meeting someone. I had to run an errand, and I screaming and the red nose, and then it was a patient, and they went, "You're not supposed to be sick." I'm like, "Well, what? Who am I? Jesus? I don't know. Of course I'm supposed to be sick. I'm just a person." Okay, so don't be. This is now a long thing as well, but it's about I don't want you to think that once you know this and once you have a handle on it, these things are never going to trip you up. So Antoinette was stuck in her limiting beliefs by her own admission now for the last 2 days. 2 days is a very short time. Most people spend a lifetime there and don't know they're there. All right. So no one's perfect. It's like we all expect to get sick occasionally, right? We're all going to be tripped up by these limiting beliefs and these coping strategies. Okay. So William Whitecloud, who is one of my teachers and teaches in the creative orientation, he identifies 12 primary limiting beliefs. But before I tell you some of them, because I probably can't rattle all 12 of them off, but I just want to tell you, at the bottom of all of that, no matter how fancy these beliefs sounds, is literally what Antoinette said: I'm a piece of shit and actually shouldn't be alive. Not viable to live. That's really fundamentally at the bottom of all of them is like, if anyone finds out how imperfect I am, I will be abandoned, I will be alone, and I will probably die. Okay, so I don't want you to get your minds sorry, Antoinette, I don't want you to get too caught up in, do I have the trust one, or do I have the control one, or do I have the unworthy one? They're just there to give us a frame of reference. Okay, so the most common, the one that almost everyone has, is I'm unworthy. And I'm unworthy can be, I'm unworthy to be loved. I'm unworthy to be looked after. I'm literally unworthy to be alive. It's the most common one of all of them. So we've got, I'm going to just name a few of them. We've got, I'm unworthy. I'm not good enough. I need to control myself, others in the world. I can't trust myself, others of the world, as Antoinette mentioned. I need to be perfect. I'm not allowed to be capable. Children who get too smothered, everyone does everything for them. I'm not allowed to be capable is a real one, right? I'm invisible. I don't belong, also a very common one. I don't belong. there is a way. In other words, there must be a way. If I could just find out the way. And I just want to tell you, many people in this personal development, new age spirituality, we're all looking for the next tool, technique, meditation, visualization, that's going to allow us to write the manual of life. Because if we've just written the manual of life, then we'll know how it works, right? And then when shit happens, we'll be able to deal with it. There is a way. There is a way. Like if I must just have to find the way. If I can just find the way, then there's another one, which is there is the right way. And that's usually my way, okay? The right way. There is only a way, one way. It's that black and white fundamentalist kind of thinking. So none of these are good or bad in of themselves. They just are. And so what ends up happening is because we have this belief about ourselves, our ego convinces us that our life purpose is to fix this. It's to fix this part of yourself that isn't actually worthy. Right? That shouldn't be alive. It's to fix it, cover it up, and compensate for it. That's the purpose of your life. Because if anyone discovers the truth of who your ego thinks you are, these things you believe about yourself, no one will love you. And if no one loves you, you're going to be abandoned. And if you get abandoned, so, imagine this was 100,000 years ago. We were all living in small bands of tribes. There were man-eating animals around us. If you got kicked out of the tribe, you were on your own, dude. You were not going to be eating, and you were probably going to be eaten. So literally, when we get rejected and abandoned, our amygdala, that part of our brain that is the primitive emotional process, is like, oh my God, we're going to die. Okay. So you can see that this is a very, very strong impetus to actually cover up and compensate for the limiting belief for the rest of your life. So some of the strategies, so the other thing I want to tell you, that not all the coping strategies are bad. In fact, they're not bad or good. They're just neutral. They're just strategies. All right. When they become bad is when you can't help yourself. You have no agency over whether you're actually doing the coping strategy or not. So let me give you an example. I'm unworthy. One of their coping strategies is to make everything about them. And I don't mean in a I'm so important, I'm so amazing I mean in a like a, it's all my fault kind of way. Like when shit hits the fan, it's like, oh, it must be me. I've messed it up. This is my responsibility. That person's upset, therefore it's all my fault. Okay? That's not the case, but that's what goes with the belief, right? And so what their strategy is they make it all about themselves. They take full responsibility for it. And then they try and fix it by people pleasing, by being nice, by being kind, by never saying no, always saying yes. Yes, I see Antoinette's face, right? Yeah, I also have this. We all have this to a certain extent, right? So the people-pleasing thing. So now what ends up happening is, so there's nothing wrong with being kind. There's nothing wrong with Antoinette asking me for a favor and it being in my capacity to do it. And me saying, sure, of course I'll help you. You're my friend. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that, all right? Or even to a stranger. It doesn't have to be your friend. There's nothing wrong with that. When it becomes a problem is when you cannot do anything other than that. So when you are exhausted, when you're under-resourced, when you're being taken advantage of, when you're being overlooked, when you're being unappreciated, and you still say yes to everything, just give me more of that. I'll take it on, right? And you're exhausted and you're on the verge of burnout, and you're still saying yes because you cannot be mean by saying, you know what? This doesn't work for me. I don't want to do this. That's when it becomes a problem. So compensating or coping mechanisms or limiting beliefs, they're not good or bad in and of themselves, right? They become a problem. It's the coping mechanism. It's actually even not the belief, right? Antoinette and I were talking about this earlier. It's not really the belief. It's the coping mechanism that you develop to compensate for the belief. That can be a problem. But now here's the thing. If you've got I'm unworthy and it makes you a kind, helpful, thoughtful person, that's not a bad thing. It only becomes a bad thing when you have to constantly be a kind, thoughtful, helpful person. So now you're in a relationship, let's say, and you're being physically, mentally, and emotionally abused. But because you have no other recourse, because you don't know this, you're like compelled to try and make it better. You take responsibility for the abuser. You take responsibility for trying to fix the relationship. This is so common in those kind of relationships. So when you're a child and you're being physically, mentally, or emotionally abused by a parent, bullied, you take that responsibility on yourself. And then what happens is you keep on playing that pattern for the rest of your life, because ultimately the I'm unworthy, the energy of that, the vibe you're giving out with that. Listen, and you can be the most confident looking person in the universe and still have this. You can put the confidence on, that's the 10% of the iceberg, and this is the 90% of the iceberg, right? So what ends up happening is then you potentially get attracted to someone else. I don't know, if you have a parent who's a bully, and then you find out that you keep on having relationships with people who bully you in certain ways. And it doesn't matter how hard you try, you never quite measure up, right? Those are the patterns that we keep on repeating. So that's how the coping strategies become a problem. Now, this is another last thing I want to say about this. Is another reason why we don't want to change a limiting belief. Because if you change a limiting belief, you lose all the good stuff of the coping mechanism also. What you really want to do is you want to be able to just recognize whether it's in play and then ask yourself, does it serve me and everyone else to take this action right now? So when I'm exhausted, when I'm at the end of my bandwidth, when I've got compassion fatigue, and I don't know, someone phones me and says, oh my goodness, I'm so sick. It's desperate. You've got to help me. I've got no money. Okay, now that doesn't mean I don't want to help this person. But when I'm at the end of the line of what I'm capable of giving, and I can't stop myself from saying yes, and I try and run an entire business on saying yes to everyone and having no one pay me, I end up unable to look after myself financially. I end up with no energy. I end up completely burnt out, and I probably end up having some sort of illness. Because what the illness does is it gives me, I'm going to be very careful about this with this word, and I'm going to put it in parentheses. It gives me an excuse to say no. Because if I've got a disease, you can't ask me for favors. If I say no, it's not because I'm mean, it's because I'm sick. If I'm healthy and I say no, my mind says, oh, that's mean, okay? There's no mitigating circumstance to being mean. So when we have these coping strategies, they get us stuff, and they are positive. So one of my limiting beliefs is I'm not good enough. One of the coping strategies for I'm not good enough is to become an achiever. Get an A. Competitive, ambitious, results driven, right? I can get a lot of things done. I can do a lot of stuff. People often say to me, oh my God, you're so busy, or you're so like, yeah, I'm so busy. I'm so busy burning myself out because I keep on having to set the bar higher, because I keep on, it doesn't matter how well I do. It doesn't matter what achievement I've reached. There's always someone doing better than me, or a way I could do better than I'm currently doing. So instead of just celebrating my wins, I'm constantly focused on where I'm not measuring up. So, oh yes, I have a great husband, and I have a great marriage, and I have a great da-da-da-da, but I'm too fat. Or yes, I have a great husband and I have great health, but I could be richer, or whatever. That is, I'm not good enough. Now, because of I'm not good enough, I know what I know. So not being good enough, when I graduated from university, I was 24 years old, left university, knew nothing, and had people who were really sick and who'd been to, usually like doctors and specialists, couldn't get a diagnosis, or did get a diagnosis but couldn't be treated. And they were like, okay, well, now we're desperate. I'm like, guys, 6 years of university didn't quite prepare me for this. So not being good enough and needing to control. That's my main one, is control. So needing the control made me, and not being good enough together, made me study more and learn more. And I realized, you know what, there's a limit to what Western medicine diagnostics could do. So I studied Chinese medicine and I learned the energy diagnostics way. Then I decided, oh no, okay, well, maybe energy medicine, but that was a little bit for me because I'm quite a logical kind of thinker. I was like, okay, well, this is great. I'll buy this. I just don't think I can do this. And then it was Jinshinjutsu, and then it was numbers, and then it was nutrition. And then it was like the next thing and what is the next book about nutrition? And what's the next book about neuroscience? And how do we heal the gut? And okay, so all of that stuff, I know a lot about all of that stuff. And the reason why I know a lot about it is because I was driven by, I'm not good enough and I need to control myself, others in the world. And these sick people that I don't know what to do with, that's out of my control, right? So now I'm out of control and not good enough because they're all going to find out I'm a fake. So best I have as many tools in my toolbox to be able to help as many people as possible. Now that sounds very altruistic. To be able to help as many people as possible is to like not end up with egg on my face every day. So has that benefited me? 100%. I have good health because of the stuff that I learned. I have helped people because of the stuff that I learned. Has it disturbed me a number of times? 100%. That's why I got kidney stones. That's why I got gallstones. That's why I've burnt myself out a number of times, all right? Because there's a fine line between how it benefits you and what is driving you to do it. So the coping mechanism is not the problem. It's whether the coping mechanism runs you or you run the coping mechanism. So I need to control myself, others in the world. Well, what we try and do is we try and impose control. Some people in a very dictatorial way. And quite frankly, if you were a patient of mine in my early couple of years in my practice, it was like my way or the highway, baby. You got to cut out the gluten and stop eating the sugar and here's the diet and come back in 3 weeks. And some people didn't come back because they were too scared because I was such a sergeant major. Control, right? It's changed over time. I can still be quite bossy, but it's changed over time because I realized that was my coping strategy. Did it work? 100%. Some people still thank me because of that. Some people really needed that. Some people didn't need that and were scared of it. So the strategy is only a problem if it runs you. So I need to control myself. We try and control things. Some of them are obvious, like I need to be perfect. Well, those are the kind of people who procrastinate, almost never get things done because they need it perfect before they can put it out into the world, for example. That's a common one. I'm not allowed to be capable. They long for freedom. They very often struggle to commit to people, projects, jobs, because they just don't want to be trapped because they were so trapped in being smothered and having everything done for them, right? They all they want is like freedom from that. I'm unworthy are often very nice. They're very kind. They're the big people pleasers. They're the ones who say yes when they actually mean no. I'm invisible. Very often make themselves. I'm invisible often becomes really famous. Like look at me, right? Because that's what we're looking for, right? I'm invisible can also be get weight problems. I'm generalizing now. Hey, this is not a given, but like I'm invisible can often become really overweight because I'm making myself bigger. The bigger I am, the more likely you are to be able to see me. Now, the 10% of my conscious mind goes, I don't want to be overweight because of whatever reason I think overweight is a bad thing. But my unconscious is, baby, if you're not big, no one's going to see you because you're invisible anyway. So then that's what happens, right? I'm not good enough. They're the ones who achieve. There is a way. They're the perennial learners. They're the ones who need 27 degrees because they're trying to find the way. There's a right way. They're the ones who very often become very, very entrenched in whatever they believe, whether that's a religion or whether that's how they believe business should be done or cultures run. They become very sort of dictatorial and despotic. Now, those are all the negative things I'm telling you about, right? But that's essentially how coping strategies work.
Loretta, that's incredible insights. And so I just put up my hand to add, if you don't mind, I need to add something to that because those of us who have had that have had a hectic trauma, it's not about sticking in that trauma, but it's about a deep realization that a deep trauma like really hectic abandonment or rape or something as a child can lead to coping strategies and coping mechanisms that are not okay and do have to
100%.
go. For example, extreme addiction. All addiction comes from that, and it is not okay to be a bad drug addict or an alcoholic. And I really need to stop drinking alcohol myself, because even though I don't drink a lot, it is not okay for me anymore, because one of my unconscious strategies, which has become conscious to cope with my very hectic abandonment wound in utero, is that I self-sabotage all the time. So every time I really start showing up, that's what happened to me on Friday. I really showed up to live my soul's purpose, to take my fear with me, to do something I was terrified to do. And it was successful. And what did I do straight afterwards? I'm being very honest now, but I think these clear examples are really helpful. Is I went down to the local restaurant and I drank a glass of wine, because I drink to celebrate, and I drink when I'm stressed, and I drink when I'm not okay. And I'm an exceptionally functional alcoholic, and that's why people like me we find it the hardest to stop drinking, because I don't drink every day. I still function. I'll still get up at 5 and go walking. But I realized from this weekend, I then had, and the weather was beautiful and the views beautiful where I live. So I had another glass at the restaurant, and I got home and I had another glass. So many people listening to this will go, but she had 3 glasses of wine. What's the big deal? She had something to celebrate. Well, the big deal is I didn't sleep that night. And it's got to the stage for me with alcohol and lack of sleep that the next day, my natural fear and anxiety, which I manage every day of my life because it's one of my automatic things that I never recognized before I got cancer, but it's always been there, that underlying fear that I just shouldn't be here and I can't trust anything. So as soon as I drink, and then I don't sleep. And then, of course, the next day I have to eat a whole lot of rubbish, which other people wouldn't even see as rubbish, but I'll have 2 pieces of bread and wada and things I would normally have, and 3 coffees. And so this is a very vulnerable share. But by 12 o'clock that day, then I've got low level, kind of depression, and I just don't feel great. And then it starts becoming raging anxiety, actually, because often the next thing in this coping mechanism, because it's the self-saboteur, actually, it's not even the alcohol or the self-saboteur. That night on the Saturday, I had more alcohol, even a little bit, but by Sunday I was feeling really bad. And then, as Loretta knows, I didn't show up to do something I needed to do for our podcast, actually. I eventually came to the party because I'm self-aware enough eventually after a few days to go, look how you've just sabotaged what you did on Friday. And so it's not about the coping mechanism per se, but that is because my coping mechanism repeatedly does that to me. I cannot drink alcohol anymore, Loretta. That's the conclusion I've got to. So I think that makes sense. Yeah. And
100%.
there's some coping mechanisms. I mean, when we go into shadow work, and we've got an amazing shadow questionnaire, the shadow questionnaire is based on psychoneuroimmunology, actually. So it looks at how our shadows, coping mechanisms, and limiting beliefs make us sick, and how some of them can be very functional and positive when we're dealing with illness and doctors. But there's some of them that we can't. If I wanted to heal my cancer, I couldn't carry on being absolute about everything. I couldn't carry
100%.
on being, So sorry, just to.
No. That's a great point. You make a great point. And the self-sabotage, we all have sabotages, right? We all have the saboteur that rears its head. And it's usually, as you say, when we step outside of our comfort zone and we step beyond our conditioned self. So one thing that's worth noting is that your limiting beliefs are always triggered when your expectations aren't met. Okay? So what I mean by that is when you have an expectation of yourself to do a certain thing or anyone else to do something and you don't get what you want, that's when your limiting beliefs are triggered, because that's how they're formed, right? So what ends up happening is when we, in your case, because you were like, okay, well, actually, you did get what you wanted. What you wanted was you wanted this successful stepping out of your comfort zone, right? And living your soul's purpose, which is what you did on Friday. So you did that and it went really well. Okay. When it goes really well, what happens is, so now your creative tension, you're getting closer to being the true you, increases. But at the same time, the psychological tension of what if I can't repeat that? What if it doesn't work in the long term? What if the person isn't satisfied if you did it with someone else? Whatever it is, okay? Those underlying fears, the psychological tension also ratchets up, right? And the stuff that we habitually do to soothe our psychological tension, those are our sabotaging programs. So in Antoinette's case, it's to drink wine. In my case, it's not. Mine, it might be to eat chocolate, right? It doesn't mean that I am more health aware because she drinks and I don't drink. It's just that my coping strategy is different, right? My soother is different. So what ends up happening is because, and as Antoinette said right in the beginning, because we're seeking the familiar and we're looking for an instant soothe to this heightened tension that we have, this inner tension that we've now created, we go for the thing that we know is going to soothe us immediately, okay? Rather than just being able to, and it's no indictment on you, Antoinette, at all. I've been in my limiting belief on and off for the last, I don't know, 2 weeks, okay? I've probably been there 3 or 4 times already today, only just today. It's only afternoon. So when you are struggling to either acknowledge or just sit with the discomfort, because here's the expectation, right? So Antoinette did something that was outside of her comfort zone on Friday, and that scared her. And not only did she do it, she did it really well because she got great feedback, okay? So you'd imagine it all went really well, okay? Where is her psychological tension, right? The psychological tension is it went really well. So her expectation is, because it went really well, maybe her expectation is she should be feeling really good about herself. So she goes, yes, I am. I'm going to have a celebration. But the part of the iceberg that is like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what if it didn't go as well as I thought it did? What if the person that I did this with didn't find it as useful as I did? What if I can't repeat this? What if it was just a fluke? I don't know, whatever. I don't know what was going through her head unconsciously, right? So can you see like that glass of wine that looks like celebrating this amazing thing, which it could have been? The first one may have been the celebratory one. The second one was a numbing the fear one. The third one was definitely numbing the fear one. Okay. So what happens is, even when good things happen, because we've got these underlying beliefs of, well, you know, I mean, Antoinette, good things can't happen to you because what did you say in the beginning? You're just a piece of shit. So this is too good to be true. It can't possibly last. Okay. That's the iceberg part, right? That's saying, you know what? Even if the person says you were great, even if it looks and smells like it was amazing, it probably wasn't. And you're going to discover that, and everyone else is going to discover that about you. And so that heightens the psychological tension. And the psychological tension is the thing we want to soothe immediately, like now, okay? And so that's how sneaky. That's what I said right in the beginning. Of course, your wheels are going to fall off, because your ego doesn't just roll over and play dead when you are starting to live according to who you really are, because that shit's scary. Your ego gets more and more sneaky about how it's going to like sell to you how you should be going back to your normal program, right? So that celebratory drink might have looked like a celebratory drink, but it couldn't have been, because you wouldn't have had the outcome that you had, if that makes sense.
Well, I think, Loretta, one of the most sneaky limiting beliefs and coping mechanisms is self-sabotage. So I think that one drink would have been fine because it was a celebration. But my self-saboteur runs very deep, and I think that's coupled with my extreme abandonment issue in the past. And that'll be one of those things you talk about that will never go away. But I can be very, very cognizant For example, if I am going to drink, but so far I haven't achieved this, is after the first glass, it was enough. I had the celebration. But the unconscious driver, the saboteur, I was like, oh, come on, we can have another one. And of course, after we've had two, we have another one. And then we don't sleep. We wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning, and then we're beating up on ourselves. And so actually, the thing is, if we're going to start doing this work of bringing the unconscious to the conscious and being extremely self-aware, as I said in the beginning, for me, so it's the same for everyone, especially if we've got extreme trauma and unconscious stuff, we have to be grounded enough to be self-aware enough to be controlled enough. Sometimes we have to control ourselves. If I'd had only one class or even two and had a good night's sleep, it would have all been a celebration. But my saboteur, without me knowing it, but in hindsight, I always know it, but I've got to catch it. You got to catch this stuff before it happens. That's the trick, but it takes time to get there. Am I right?
Yeah, you're right. But I also want to say it's sometimes very difficult to catch it. So every time you catch it afterwards and you have a conversation with yourself, or like we're having a conversation now, you're actually programming your reticular activating system to catch it earlier next time. And you might not see, because your reticular activating system is neutral. It works with whatever you put into it. All right. So that's why it's useful even after the fact. So you know what very often happens is like, so Antoinette might have been tempted to go, well, okay, I'm just going to put on my big girl pants, discipline myself now, never doing this again. Okay. So now she has an expectation that she's never, ever going to do it again. So then something happens and she has major psychological tension. If she catches it there and she goes, okay, how do I want to soothe my psychological tension? I want to have wine. Okay, well, you know what? What would be a different way that I could soothe it if that's really what I needed to do? Or what would I love to create instead of soothing right now? What am I creating? So now she's focusing on this thing that she wants to create, right? And then she asks herself from her spirit, what would be an action that would be useful for her? Not like what is good advice, like literally something that's internally inspired, put on your favorite song and just put on your favorite music. And just sit for 5 minutes, just listening to your favorite song. And if you want to move your body, for example, that might be what comes up for her in the moment, right? Which means she catches it. And now she's like, okay, I'm on it. I've got it, right? But let's just assume that 3 weeks down the line, she doesn't catch it. And she repeats the same pattern. She wakes up on Saturday morning or Sunday morning and she realizes, oh my God, I've been awake for half the night. My nervous system is completely dysregulated now. I'm definitely going to want to soothe myself. This is not a great idea. What could I do that would really serve me? She could find something else to do, or she could go, you know what, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go, because I've now caught myself. I had too much wine and I was awake all night, right? So I'm going to regulate my nervous system today, make sure that I get a good night's sleep tonight. And tomorrow, when I've recovered from this, I'm going to unpack how that happened. Not so that I can beat myself up, not so that I can tell myself how awful I am, not so that I can, none of that, just so that I can actually see the pattern. Because this is the thing. As soon as you go and see the pattern, you tell your reticular activating system, recognize the pattern next time you see it. And maybe the next time you recognize it before you take the action, you recognize it at the level of what you're thinking, or you recognize it at the level of what you're feeling. And you don't have to wait until you've taken the action. But this is not like a dead cert. If you do X, you're going to get Y. Sometimes it's going to work better than others. That's why we have to be compassionate with ourselves. So the way I do this is I imagine myself. Have you ever seen how cute a 3-year-old is? It was my daughter's birthday yesterday. And so I made her a reel, right, of those baby photos. And honestly, I was crying while I was putting the reel together because she was so adorable when she was 3. And I mean, she's still adorable. She's 25 now. But you know what? She was just like so new, and she was just lovely, right? So I imagine myself as that 3-year-old or younger. And I go, okay, if she came to me with oh my God, I had too much to drink. I didn't spot it. My limiting belief ran the show. I did the soothing. Basically, I did not walk my talk. I didn't walk my talk. Now I have a choice. I can either say to that child, "You bloody useless. You need a good hiding. Blah, 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 blah. What the hell is wrong with you? Pull yourself together. Oh my God, you should be ashamed of yourself." I never spoke to my 3-year-old child like that. And this is not because like I'm the best parents in the universe. I just didn't do that. I know I didn't do that. And so why am I doing this to myself? So what I do is I imagine that the person who's going, "Oh my God, I messed up," is the 3-year-old me, who, by the way, was also super cute. And I'm sure you were super bloody adorable when you were 3, because we're all adorable when we're 3. So if you can't do it for yourself, your adult self, because you've been so conditioned, then imagine it's your, because it is your little self. It's your little self that had the wounding. So can we please just be compassionate with ourselves while we're on the road to this? Let's try not to be perfect. Let's try not to get an A. Let's just do it. Because every time we do it, we're actually telling our reticular activating system and our subconscious that we are worth caring for and being kind to. And that's how we cultivate self-love.
Yes. So what you pointed out to me is that I treat my little inner child. We're going to talk about reparenting and inner child work. And by the way, this is all related to health. We haven't got there yet, but it is, I promise you. I treat my inner child, the little saboteur, Subby is her name. I treat her like my mother treated me, rough, harsh, judgmental, whipping. And you pointed that out to me, and that is why that pattern, even though I'm so self-aware, comes back, because and now I'm soothing. Yeah, we have to be very kind to our. Yeah, that's beautiful, Loretta.
So I just want to add about how it makes us sick, because what you've just said. So let's just assume that Antoinette didn't have this awareness, and what Antoinette did was she drank a bottle of wine every day. Okay. And she didn't sleep, and she got more and more anxious, and she needed anxiolytic medication. I'm not knocking the medication. I'm just saying she basically like slapped a Band-Aid on all her problems. I can guarantee you her physiology is going to suffer. I can guarantee you that her adrenal glands are going to freak out. I can guarantee you her liver is going to be unhappy. She's probably going to have skin eruptions, or she may develop joint pains. So it's not a long lead. Our habits and our choices in terms of what we eat, what we drink, what we think, how we treat ourselves, the accumulation of those choices on top of our genetics lead to our diseases. And so, we may not have spoken today necessarily about a physical disease and a limiting belief. And maybe we could do a show like that. We could literally take a belief and we can trace it to a disease, right? Not that I believe in like painting by numbers. So please, not everyone with I'm unworthy is going to get cancer. It doesn't work like that. Okay. But the fact is that every choice we make is determines how we treat ourselves. It determines how we eat, how we move, how much time we make for ourselves, whether we rest, whether we sleep well, whether we've got good sleep hygiene. Those patterns of behavior, those choices are what determine our health or not. And sorry, what I was going to say was we might not have been speaking about specific diseases here, but we're definitely speaking about mental health. Because there's no way. So, Antoinette, would you have said that your mental health was in tickety-boo condition on Saturday and Sunday?
It was absolutely dreadful, if I'm honest. In the past, when I wasn't self-aware and wasn't on this journey, it would have just been another day that I felt shit. But I knew exactly what was happening. And by the way, I've had arthritis, so I still have it, but I manage it very well. My autoimmune diseases, fibromyalgia, thyroid issues, thyroid cancer, lymphatic cancer. So I'm not listing all those because I'm proud of how sick I've been, but I can tell you now that's how I got into psychoneuroimmunology and into everything Loretta's into, because PNI psychoneuroimmunology is now scientifically proving that what we think, how we operate in the world, and this stuff does actually make us sick. So That's why I'm so passionate about people knowing this, and so is Loretta. So let's do a whole episode on that.
Let's do it. So I just want to add. So you know what? You can discipline yourself to eat the right food. You can sometimes eating the right food can be the coping strategy that's punishing. Just saying. The green juice can be the coping strategy that's punishing. The water fast can be the coping strategy that's punishing. You know, it's that idea that you need to be cleansed, you need to be better, you need to be cleaner. Now, sometimes the water fast can be the most healing thing that you choose to do for yourself. And this is why it's so important that we know this stuff, because there isn't a one-size-fits-all treatment package for every single person. Every person is unique. And so we have to stop treating disease and we have to look at the human and treat the human. That's the one thing, and I am going to punt homeopathy here. That's the one thing about homeopathy. There are no remedies for diseases in homeopathy. There are only remedies for patients. And each patient is unique. So you can have 7 people with bronchitis and they will have 7 different remedies, because the one will be better if they have hot drinks. The other one will be better if they're lying down. The other one will be better for open air. The other one want to be covered. The one will hate heat. Those little differentials, they are what make each person's symptom picture unique. So it's when the bacteria or the virus, let's say in a bronchitis, hits a particular terrain, it's going to show up looking a certain way. And my terrain is uniquely Loretta. And Antoinette's terrain is uniquely Antoinette. And yes, there might be similarity. So we can generalize, you know, we can say I'm unworthy or people pleasers. People pleasers often have autoimmune disease. We can do that, but it's actually not, it's not like painting by numbers. It's not so linear. It's not, you know, so I mean, there are lots of books that are like, if you've got this, this is what it means. And a lot of them are very good and incredibly accurate. I'm not knocking that. But you know what? This is what you've got. This is what it means. Does not fit everyone. This is what it means is like a general ballpark that you can go and looking in. But when you go looking in there, it becomes individual. And that's why I cannot tell you what is the best treatment for you. I can give you my advice and options, and then I would rather teach you to trust your own intuition and your spirit so that you can work out what's best for you. And so knowing what your limiting beliefs are and knowing what your strategies are, I think it's like the first step just about, and having an awareness of that. And you don't have to be an expert at that. Sorry, Antoinette, you don't have to be an expert at that in order to heal, but you have to start practicing that alongside the other stuff that you're going to start doing, right?
So, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to stop now.
No, absolutely. That was gold, absolute gold. And I was just going to punch you a bit for no other reason, but there are very few people that can work with people in the way you do, sick people, because you have the homeopathy background. And I've done homeopathy my whole life, so I agree. But over and above that, you have tools and techniques and the capacity to enable people to choose the right option for their health healing from their higher self, that intuitive self. And I thought I was making good choices my whole life before cancer. We've spoken about this on nearly every episode. I was the green juicer. I was the faster. I cured my fibromyalgia. But my intuition told me to do chemo when I got cancer, and I was horrified. But that's where my healing lay on every level, physical, mental, and spiritual, and only kinesiology, actually, and my intuition. I didn't know Loretta yet, got me there. So to have access to somebody like Loretta, let me tell you, is A+++, because to get there by yourself, I know, is not so easy. So it doesn't make her, she's not going to wave a wand and make you better, but she will get you, fast track you to getting to the point of looking at the underlying things that may have triggered the disease and intuitively what to do next.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I do want to say that since I work like this, how interesting. I no longer feel like I need to be in control, because actually it's not actually my decision or my choices. It literally is a co-creation. It's a collaboration with the client. So I don't have to take all the responsibility, because I'm actually not the healer. That's so freeing. I just want to tell you, so freeing, because it's actually not my responsibility. It's our collaborative responsibility to help that person. So, I actually have the certainty that the person can do it. And then I just have to teach the person what they need to do in order to be able to do it. And then they just have to practice it. Some people get it really quickly. Some people takes a long time. I've got one client, she's messaged me this morning and she said, I know I've asked this question 100 times, but please just clarify. I said, you know what? It's okay. You can ask this question 75 million times, because the fact that she's asking the question means that she really wants to know. And she's committed to the process.
Yeah, Loretta. So I think we could wrap up maybe, unless you got something else to say.
No. I think we've been going on for a long time now.
We need to add to this, but just to say, you said before we started recording, you would be willing to offer people some free resources. So maybe you could speak to that, because I think it would be quite valuable for people. And then that will mean also that you will be asked to join our mailing list, but that would not necessarily. Loretta and I don't do many emails at all, and Loretta does not bomb people with sales emails. I can tell you now. Neither of us operate in that space. Some of her newsletters are very valuable, and you'd also get access then to all her pop-up workshops, her long-term things she offers. Yeah, so go for it, Loretta. Tell us what you're going to give her.
I also just want to say that we'll put you on our mailing list if you want the resource, and if you want to unsubscribe, you're just going to click the unsubscribe button. Okay, so we don't need you to sacrifice your firstborn. So I have a resource. It's a simple PDF that's got all 12 of the major limiting beliefs and some of their more common coping strategies. Not all of them, please. It's not exhaustive because the list is very long. So it's got 3 or 4 of the most common coping strategies. There is a process that you can uncover your limiting beliefs. It's not particularly complex, all right? But this, looking at the PDF and recognizing some of the behaviors, it doesn't matter if you don't have that limiting belief. But when you see, oh, this is a coping strategy, the next time you find yourself doing that behavior, just ask yourself, is this what I always do to soothe myself in this kind of circumstance? And if it is, well, that's information. Don't judge it. Oh my goodness, that could be one of my coping strategies. File it away. Now your reticular activating system is going to look for more. Okay, so this is a starting point. It gives you the 12 limiting beliefs, and it gives you the 3 or 4 of their major compensatory strategies or coping mechanisms. If you want that PDF, I don't have my shit enough together to have put this on my website, so you can just get it directly off there. So we're going to leave my email address in the show notes, right? Just drop me an email and just say limiting beliefs. If you want to just put it as the heading, limiting beliefs, I'll know that that's what you're after, and I will actually just send it to you, okay? And then from there, you'll go onto the mailing list. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Loretta. Yeah, maybe just say podcast limiting beliefs, so Loretta knows exactly that it came from this. And so thank you, Loretta. I think that was maybe not exactly what we intended for the whole episode, but
probably I think not at all.
It was perfect. So we've got a lot more episodes now to come from this one. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And the fact that you're here and listening to this stuff means you're one of those people who's willing to go on this journey. And it's not everybody's journey, but it's a journey to healing, physical, mental, and spiritual. So welcome. We're here to journey with you, to offer you, as much as we can. And by the way, Loretta didn't share any of her illnesses linked to her limiting beliefs. So next time.
Sorry. Okay? Oh, next time we'll have to have a special. We'll have to have just one, okay, like a special one. Okay, I promise. I'm up for it.
No, I think mine were more than enough for one episode. Okay,
yours were juicy. Yours were very juicy. Thanks, Antoinette. Bye.
Okay, bye.